Welcome to the Top Order podcast. This week in cricket coming at you. We'll talk New Zealand, Sri Lanka, a missed opportunity for the Black Caps. We'll talk a little bit of India, Bangladesh, Ashwin, Jadeja, a brilliant Pant 100. We'll also talk a little bit about England and Australia. Baldy can crow about Travis Head, and I might have a few words about Harry Brook.
Why not?
All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, I'm reliably informed that we're a New Zealand-based cricket podcast and we therefore should start with New Zealand, Sri Lanka this week. We will come on, so don't tune out just yet if you're anywhere else in the world. We will cover India, Bangladesh, England, Australia. We might also talk a little bit of white ferns in South Africa, Afghanistan towards the end of the pod as well. But after that schmozzle of a rained-out test match, New Zealand have got onto the park, and let's talk about whether all that corridor cricket with the spinning ball in the hotels helped New Zealand or hindered them. But your boys' thoughts, I guess, after that test match?
I'll jump in first, Lippy.
Yeah.
I'm actually I've got a mixture of emotions with this. I'm actually quite disappointed that we lost. I think, our recent history, I'm going into every game going, we can win this, we should win this. But then you think again, do we have the right weapons to actually go really well in the subcontinent? We hardly ever play a spinner when we are playing at home in New Zealand. All of a sudden we go to the subcontinent and it seems like we're playing 7-8 spinners if you count them all up. But I just don't think we have the skills at the moment to consistently win in the subcontinent. Losing the toss was a big one, even though that we actually did give ourselves a real opportunity early on day one. I think we really sort of let them get away in that second and third session. And I actually texted you, I think, after the first day, and I was like, they've already got too much. They've already got too many runs. It's going to be very hard to chase down a score batting fourth in that test. But look, I was initially very disappointed, but I can understand that there is a little bit of development to this team, a little bit of a development phase that we're going through at the moment. I'm interested to see how we bounce back because we've got a lot of tests in a row here on the subcontinent. We want to see some growth from these guys.
That's the concern. I guess probably the biggest concern I have out of all of this, I would say, is that might have been our best chance to win out of the next 5 tests for New Zealand. We've got one more starting tomorrow, again in Galle. That pitch started to turn as the game went on. Traditionally, it turns there. I imagine it might even be tougher to bat on from this point on for the second test, and then 3 tests in India. And we know how tough it is to win in there. We'll talk about India coming up soon. But yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because there were a lot of good things in that game. There really was for New Zealand. And I think if you want to have that glass half full attitude, you can look and say there was loads of excuses for New Zealand. It's very difficult to go over. We have a lack of game time to start with. We haven't played Test cricket for ages since that game that we were at against Australia in March. I think that was. Over here in New Zealand, we've never won in Galle. It's a place that we.
It's a fortress, isn't it?
It's a fortress. Hey, honestly, it's on my bucket list. Galle. Gee, that is
awesome.
You look at that ground as a fan, and watching the experience. I would love to go and watch a game there. Yeah, even the kids were coming up to me and just going, "Oh, look, there's the ocean. There's the other part of the ocean." Yeah, that fort. Geez, yeah, I would love to play there. But as you said, we lost the toss. We're chasing 275 in the 4th innings. It's a challenging pitch, but we had so many chances. We had so many positions where you said they had too many, but they didn't. They didn't have too many, as it turned out. And New Zealand, I think those are the moments where Tim Southey talked about it. We were 255 for 4 at the end of day 2. And we collapsed to be 340 all out. And that's probably the moment where we go, we need 450. When the kids were watching the TV, we're going well here. And I said, we actually need to be 150 in front here to make sure that we're on top of this game.
Yeah. So you think it is that kind of first innings batting where you lost your way, not necessarily the chase, or not even necessarily letting Sri Lanka off the hook a little bit in the first innings, because they were 5 for 180.
They could have been 5 for 110. Yeah. I mean, that's the other pivotal moment is, Glenn Phillips misjudged that catch to get Kamindu. Kamindu goes on, score. I think he was on 20 then. It would have been 110 for 5. he goes on to get 100 and sort of anchors that innings as Sri Lanka goes on and scores 300. And he takes that catch. I mean, the funny thing is, well, wasn't funny at the time, but he's doing his Glenn Phillips kind of magic-y thing where he goes, I'm going to predict where this ball is and I'm going to run and try and get it before the shot actually comes to me. And that proved to be his downfall because he went the wrong way and then it ballooned over and, he made meal of it in the end. And yeah, look, 110 for 5 with the way that we saw the tails collapse. Yeah. That's another pivotal moment in that game.
Yeah. I think that probably the flip side I'll give you, and you've alluded to it a little bit in terms of your preparation. And Sri Lanka obviously had just toured England. And I think when you kind of look, yes, completely different conditions, but their batters, they've had some form. All the batters really through that England series had at least one contribution. And I think you've seen pretty steady contributions from a number of players in this game. So I know in the olden days it would be conditions are completely different, but I don't think the gap between conditions is as big now. That we've got, pitches with decent drainage, pitches that are, you don't want to get fined anymore. So you're trying to produce that CEO pitch so it lasts 5 days. So
I think they did. Yeah, I think it was a great cricket pitch.
Yeah, I think they're in the pound seats, Sri Lanka. So I guess my question was, I know you want to win. You expected to win though?
I did personally. Yeah, okay. I expected to win, but I would say that probably anywhere except India or Australia, that I would expect us to go there and put up a real fight. And, we mentioned those 2 times, the sort of early day one, and then when we were only 4 down going, it was day 3? It
was start of day 3. We collapsed,
We just needed to take one of those opportunities. If we take one of those opportunities, I feel like this result is the other way around. We win by 63 rather than losing by.
And there's a couple of, there's silly little moments, there's that missed catch, there's, the Mitchell run out, that with him and Phillips, I mean, it's just sort of silly stuff, I guess, is the little things. Those big moments that I think 3-4 years ago when New Zealand won the World Test Championship, we won those moments and we're just not winning them now. We saw that in that game that we just alluded to before against Australia, we dropped a catch early on day 4 or whatever it was, and that ended up costing us. Mitchell Marsh goes on and scores those runs and wins that game from a position where New Zealand looked like they were now in a position to win those games, and we're just kind of not winning those games anymore. I mean, Baldy, I think you should jump in. I would love to hear what you think about kind of where, before we get on to a few individual players, kind of where New Zealand is at as a test side at the moment.
It's interesting listening to you both talk about New Zealand's performance, because the first thing that you started with was a raft of excuses about why it was New Zealand couldn't win that game. And that's not normally the attitude that a New Zealand fan would take going into a game or watching their team in hindsight. That they would either say, well, we were good enough or we weren't. But the first thing that we started with was, well, it was hard for all these reasons. And if that's the mindset shift, it's a little bit concerning for me, because there is really no excuse for New Zealand other than Sri Lanka playing well, which they did, and we'll absolutely give them credit for that. But all of the things that you have said are all true, 100% true, but I wouldn't have expected you to say any of those things at the outset of your sort of monologue there. So that was the interesting sort of little positional shift for me, where you're starting to kind of think about this cricket team in the context of, well, it's good if they do well, but we're not expecting them, as you both said, to do well and to win those games anymore. And take nothing away from Sri Lanka. I think it's a real mindset shift.
I think, to just clarify that, I was saying it more in the sense of these were the obstacles they had to overcome. And I actually think in many ways they did overcome all of those obstacles. And I think that's probably why this felt like more of a missed opportunity for me, because they overcame those things and then didn't go on and actually finish the job and win the game.
And that's the real actual difference, I think, between the golden World Test Championship winning era side and this side, is that you've identified 2 key moments. As you said, Raj, they win one of them, they win the Test match. New Zealand sides of days gone past definitely win those key moments. They make sure they've got the right people in those scenarios, that they take care of business. And I would have expected, as you guys said, from 4 for 269 to be then 9 for still behind, only chasing 300 in the first innings. That's not a very New Zealand way to go about it. And I think, all other things being equal, your decision to pick Phillips and Santner was the right decision. but one of those guys kind of let you down in that scenario, and they didn't sort of hang around with Glenn Phillips. The tail didn't hang around with Glenn Phillips, except for your number 10, who got you a 35, 40-run partnership to get you out of a bit of poo, because 9 down, you were still behind in the first innings, and you should have been 9 down, 100 or 150 in front and bossing that game. So credit to Sri Lanka, really. You have to give them credit. Both sides of the coin, batting and bowling, they did a tremendous job to stay in the game. They had one guy, as we said in the England series, go on and get a big score, no surprises who it is, and then allowed their bowlers to take advantage of the conditions in the back end of the game.
We want to talk about individual performances. I'd like to start with your impressions on Will O'Rourke, and then I know we'll come on and probably let the clock start and we'll talk about spin. But yeah, really impressive for a guy that won't have played a lot of cricket in that part of the world to, show, I wouldn't say hostility, but certainly consistent pace. Was at the batsman, I think, through the course of particularly the first innings performance from him. But yeah, must be stoked really with the way he bowled.
I actually thought he was quite poor with the bat. A 2 and a 0. But look, with the ball, as you normally say, it feels like I haven't seen enough of him in the sort of domestic circuit, but it feels like they flew the Aussie speed guns in, and he was actually getting those numbers up there. I was actually quite surprised by those numbers.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with his speed. It's
inflation. It's happening all over the world, even in cricket.
It's a major part of our arsenal. You know, when I sort of in my opening monologue, I was talking there about us maybe not having the weapons. That is a weapon that we haven't really had, consistently since the Shane Bond period. But having someone who can get into those, mid to high 140s would complement our bowling attack that we have at the moment. And it was good to see. I thought he bowled really well.
Oh, it was super exciting to watch him bowl. I mean, yeah, especially, you took there. I mean, this was his first test away from home. I think what is his third test. He got, in general, he's still a super young guy. It feels like there's an awful lot of potential there. And I think for me, the thing that I enjoyed the most was that he kept coming. It's sort of easy, I think, for a young player to be excited and run in and steam in on that first spell. You bowl your first 4 or 5 overs, and you're hitting the pitch hard and you're getting excited, and you took a couple of wickets, cleaned up Nasanka, like you get on a buzz there. But I think probably when I think to that second innings, he actually started them picking up wickets. They got called it leg gully, which was obviously a plan. I think they talked about, who was it? Santner, I think, was it cover or mid wicket, and turned around and pointed to Southee, and like that was obviously something they thought about. And he looks like a bowler who is thinking about what he's doing. He was running in, banging it in, trying to extract some something from this wicket that pretty much was dead for all of the other seamers in the game. So yeah, I really think that, as you said, he is someone that, I hope he can stay fit. I mean, the prospect of him staying fit, if Sears can be around and Jameson can get back on the park, which personally I think is going to be a huge challenge. I mean, someone that's gone through the injuries that he's had. I mean, when it happened, we sort of talked about Pat Cummins, didn't we? And, he's been able to do that. So I hope, I would love for Kyle Jameson to have kind of the consistency that Pat Cummins has found later in his career. But, I mean, a year ago, 18 months ago, we were sitting here going, all of these bowlers are sort of disappearing, Bolt and Southee and Wagner and, this real golden generation that we had. If some of these, Will O'Rourke gives us hope. I think that if he can stay fit and stay on the park, there's some exciting bowlers still to come for New Zealand.
And boys, Baldy said he thought you got the selections right with Phillips and Santner. Any opposing points? How do you think they went? And I guess make up for the next game as well from the bowling attacks perspective whilst we're talking about that?
I think Phillips showed how valuable he is, and I don't even really think there's a question about him anymore. I mean, he's getting runs, he's contributing. I mean, that ball through the gate to pick up a bowl. I mean, how long do 14 minutes? Yeah, how long do we want to talk about that for? But even just the way he was able to hit out at the end, and I know often we've talked about he's kind of wasted at 7. I actually think that clearly showed why he, as annoying as it is, sort of has to bat 7, because I don't see Blundell being able to do that, So Blundell's a much better batter, I think, with the other batters whereas Phillips can turn that switch and bat with the tail. Yep.
What if he had another batter to bat with instead of batting with the tail all the time?
Well, I agree, but he still has another batter to bat with. It's just that some of the when it seems like when he comes in, they all get out. I mean, he contributed to Daryl Mitchell getting out, so
well, that's true.
he's got himself to blame there a little bit. But
you know what's better than having one recognised batter to bat with?
Two.
Yeah, having two recognised batters to bat with.
I would switch Phillips and Blundell 100%.
I know the logic that I know what you're saying. Yeah. It does make sense to me that Blundell would bat better with the other specialist batters, but Phillips, he could just cause so much more damage than Blundell can. You know, if Blundell was eking out runs towards the end of the innings, so be it. But you know, if Phillips batted with recognised batters for 2.5 hours, that could make a real big difference in the outcome of a test. I don't know.
Yeah, tactically, there's probably some things to talk about, but I think from a selection perspective, I wasn't upset with what with the team that they picked in any of those pivotal spots. The one thing for me was Southey. I thought that he was probably a little bit. He didn't look like he was going to get wickets during that test. Definitely when he came back, sort of second and third spell was a little bit worrisome for me. However, if they hadn't have selected him, I would have been the first person saying, why didn't you select Tim Southey for the first test? I've done that many times before, but that's probably the only change I'd be looking to make is probably a Matt Henry or Sears or whoever, bring in someone else with the pace.
Yeah, I think they will be thinking, I mean, the Southey one is so tricky, isn't it? Because he's obviously the test captain. They already talked about, you know, he might not play all of these 5 tests. And to be fair to him, I don't think he did a huge amount wrong in that test. He bowled reasonably well. He did a good job. To the one wicket he did pick up, that was actually really clever bowling. You know, he set up that wicket, got it caught at mid-wicket. But you could just see, like, you just need to be faster to actually have an impact on these wickets as a seamer. If there's no swing, you need to be quicker. And Southey's pace, unfortunately, at this stage just isn't there compared to Matt Henry or Ben Sears. So, you know, I'm sure they are thinking about that. You know, he obviously had, I don't know if it was him that thought about that Lee Galle plan or whatever. Like, his smarts are still there. Like I said, the way he set up that bowling, you know, to get the solitary wicket. But yeah, I mean, they've got to be thinking about that. And I think for Santner, the other one you mentioned, I think seeing the way that Phillips bowled and even having some more confidence in Rachin, they might, and probably the fact that Sri Lanka have a few left-handers, they might think about Bracewell and maybe go, okay, well, why don't we have Ajaz as our left-arm spinner, Bracewell as our right-arm spinner, and then we've got Rachin can bowl instead of Ajaz if we need to, and we've got Phillips that can bowl instead of Bracewell, because at the moment, Santner didn't have his best test. I mean, Phillips takes that catch off Kamindu and, you know, maybe it's a completely different story for Mitchell Santner. But in a way, you didn't really need Santner and Ajaz sort of bowling at the same time. They sort of cancelled each other out when Ajaz, I think Ajaz started a bit slow and then picked it up during the, you know, as he got through the test.
Could they play another seamer and leave one of those spinners out, spinning all-rounders out?
I guess it depends on how much you trust Phillips and Ravindra to bowl. I mean, you know, there's talk that Sri Lanka is going to play 3 spinners in this test.
Yeah.
The seamers just didn't. I think as the test wore on, and considering it's the same venue, I think that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
But I do think it's something they might want to consider in India.
Because then you get 2 genuine quicks in, and then you comment around Southey and pace. I see where you're coming from in this test match. This was quite docile as a wicket.
Yes.
But I think, you know, someone like Jimmy Anderson finds a little bit of a way with whether it's wobble seam. Southey has got that in the locker. He's probably not quite that same class and similar speed, I think, but maybe with that new ball up front, and then 2 guys, if Will O'Rourke can go back to back and play 2 in a row, and then you bring in Sears or
I think it's something that they might think about in India. It's particularly if we see in India wickets like we saw in that India-Bangladesh test.
India have a better balanced attack, don't they? So therefore they can have a better balanced pitch.
I think Bracewell does give you something with the bat at number 8 as well that Santner should be giving you. And I think the only criticism that I think Mitchell Santner would have of himself is he didn't contribute enough with the bat in this Test match, particularly when he was batting with a recognised batter at that number 8 position. So I think that's the only reason that he'll feel like he's probably not contributed as much as he would want to. I don't think from his bowling perspective, I know that, there are a lot of, lefties and there's not some great matchups for Santner, but when we talked about all the things that Mitchell Santner could do well in this series with the ball, I don't think any of that has really changed. I think he just didn't have as good a match as he expected to have. And unfortunately, the reality is that New Zealand didn't have enough runs in the first innings and he was contributory to that. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily change him unless it was a matchup thing and you wanted the ball turning the other way, in which case Bracewell becomes your option.
And I guess this leads into when I mentioned tactics earlier. I've said it before. You only can bowl 2 spinners at a time. If you've got 4 spinners, that's great, but you can only bowl 2 of them at a time. And if you look at how the Sri Lankans used Jayasuriya, and, as their number 1 spinner, he bowled 70 overs in that Test match and had 9 wickets?
9 for, yep.
He was incredibly dangerous and hard to play. You sort of contrast that with how Ajaz bowled. He bowled 50. He bowled 50 overs in the Test, 20 in the first innings, and then 30 in the second innings when he took those 6. But I feel like Ajaz is one of those guys who we've talked about before. You just park him up at one end and keep bowling him. He is our number 1 spinner. That is literally his job, is to go there to the subcontinent and take wickets. Yeah. I think that we may have been clouded a little bit in our judgment with so many tools that we had. Maybe we didn't give him enough overs to have more of an impact on the
I think
test.
I agree with you, but I would say that I think, go back to my comment before, I think it took him a while to get into this test. And I don't think that's especially surprising given, when was the last time he played? He played
when he last played a test in Asia.
Yeah, well, in Bangladesh when we were there, a long time ago. So, he's had domestic cricket, but he's again someone that's not in the franchise circuit that's going around and even really playing any game. So he hasn't had a game since the first class season finished here. So it's not especially surprising that it took him a while to get into it. But once he did, you're spot on. Once he did, he got into his rhythm, and he is the bowler that you want to just keep going, because he doesn't necessarily rip out a side, but he's smart. He works out, this is my area. This is, I'm aiming for these foot marks, and I'm going to hit those foot marks and pick up my wickets that way and make it very challenging. And yeah, he did a fantastic job. Honestly, his record in Asia, which is essentially his test career, although he has played a few games at home, he's taken 66 wickets from 12 tests, an average of 27, strike rate of 52. That's a slightly better strike rate than Ravindra Jadeja. It's almost the same. It's about the same wickets per test as Ravi Ashwin. He's better in all 3 categories than Nathan Lyon in Asia. Look, I'm not by any stretch of imagination trying to say he's in the same class as those guys.
What are you trying to say then with those numbers?
That they're fantastic, basically. Like he has shown how good he is in those conditions. And, every one of us we've had all these thoughts many times. You wonder what could have happened if he played every single test, like a Nathan Lyon, like some of these other guys that get to play in those conditions.
Maybe pick a spinner at home.
Well, that's a different conversation.
That's not a criticism leveled at anyone at this table. I think
none of us are selectors.
No, also we're all on the same page about about playing spinners in most of, if not all, conditions. But yeah, what could have been for his career? I'm not sure that he'd have the same success at home, as he would away, but certainly he would provide New Zealand a point of difference in their attack, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk a little bit about Rachin? I know, all on the slack as he approached that. What wasn't to be in the end, but how good was he in this Test match with the bat?
He was pretty good, wasn't he?
No, he was very good. The best sort of plaudit I can give him is that he's made me rethink my Conway needs to bat at 4 campaign that I've been on. Maybe Conway needs to bat at 5.
But just pretty good.
If he's going to put the work in like he did, he went to India before the Afghanistan test, put the work in. It's obviously playing off. He spent a little bit of time there with the IPL, obviously, and look, it was a great innings. He looked a cut above what we had in our side in that second innings, definitely. And he's still got a lot of time in his career to develop. So I was very impressed with how he batted.
What do you make of how his tactics against the spinners, because he's very he wanted to play everything off the back foot. So it was quite interesting watching the different plans for the New Zealand batters. Actually, I found that quite fascinating. That Latham swept really well in that first innings. Kane has sort of got his own tactics. He likes to get forward. And I think actually for Kane, you could see he didn't want to kick it away when they started bowling leg stump to him. Blundell's another one who likes to play on the back foot. But Rachin had such a distinct, this is what I'm going to do. And he did it to Nathan Lyon as well. Same kind of plans going back. And when he was doing it in that first innings, at the start of his second innings, the commentators were all like, oh, I don't know about this. He's going back to everything. He's got to start getting forward. And he's cutting them off middle stump. But it worked. And I loved the way that he had a plan and he backed himself, and he just trusts his skills, right?
He does. I mean, the one advantage playing back gives you is you get time to see what the ball's going to do off the wicket. And if your hand-eye is super duper really, really good, then you can make that adjustment. But you are allowing the ball to do things. The ball can't spin if you get to it on the full. It never has and it never will. But his technique is such that he's found something that works for him, just like, Matthew Hayden in India worked. The sweep worked for Hayden. The sweep seems to work for Latham, or that's at least his preferred technique. So as much as anything, mentally, it's about what you feel comfortable with in terms of dealing with that variation. The litmus test, I think, will be when he goes to India and the ball starts to do different things. Is that technique going to stand up to that variation? And we'll only really see that if he goes to India and scores runs against Akshar and Ravi Jadeja and Ravichandran Ashwin, whatever two or even three of those play in that test series against New Zealand, him against those guys will be a real examination of whether that technique is going to be effective to
maybe
score big runs. The bounce, well, it does things in 3 dimensions in India, right? The pace changes, the bounce changes, the sideways movement changes. The only thing that doesn't vary is time in India in terms of the 4-dimensional matrix. So,
I think the thing for me, it depends on. Your point, Lippy. He had his method and he stuck to it. Is important. I think the other component for me is he picking the spinner and picking those sort of variations, because that's often why you go back. As Bordy said, you're going back because it gives you that little bit more time. If he has that method and he is able to pick what's happening, then he reminded me a little bit of the way Graham Thorpe used to play spin, which was to use the crease, get very, very deep in the crease. And then the other piece, I think, is then when you're batting with a Latham, a little bit like, again, if I use the Thorpe example, he would be bat a hell of a lot with someone like Trescothick, whose method was to use the sweep and to get forward. And then that plays a dimension with the bowlers that you're
really
facing,
hard to bowl to.
That they have to, well, you would know as an elite level spinner that you've then got to adjust your lengths to 2 guys that are doing different things, and that helps from a teamwork perspective as well. But yeah, he looked really assured. But yeah, probably a different gravy on an absolute Bunsen against Axar and Jadeja and Ashwin and.
Well, we might see it. We might see it in the second test. We might see it turn a lot more. I do think your point about him wanting to learn is why I've always been so excited about his prospects. I just think that he is someone you can see. He's thinking all the time. He's thinking when he's out there. He's thinking. When he loves the game. I feel like you can sense that about him, and he really wants to succeed.
Yeah, he reminds me of a fighter who trains really well. Like when he gets into that game in the middle, he knows he's done the prep work and he just feels and looks comfortable. Whereas other guys who maybe haven't really done their homework as much or do their preparation in a different way look a little bit more agitated and startled or put off by variations and stuff. He just feels to me like a guy who leaves no stone unturned in his prep, and he just goes out there going, I've done the miles, I know what I'm going to do. This is now it's effectively just an extension of that practice. So yeah, he's so exciting as a player going forward because he has the talent to back it up, right?
He's a special player. Raj, just before we leave the India or go to the India test, you mentioned Conway before. A lot of people are now very concerned about Conway. Where are your levels at with him? I think he's had his last 10 tests, his average is 25. It's been, I think, 14 innings since he scored a 54 New Zealand. How worried should we be about this player that we thought, when he burst onto the scene, we were talking about him in the same breath as, maybe he can be a Kane Williamson level sort of player for New Zealand?
In terms of, am I worried that he's going to lose his spot? I don't think that. Am I worried that people have started to figure him out a little bit? Yes. I think that definitely the Sri Lankans in the second inning, they bowled around the wicket to him just outside that fourth, fifth stump, and he was vulnerable there.
That inside here, Jay.
Yeah. So that is a place where people have recognised that he is vulnerable. He's going to have to learn to battle that, and I'm not sure he is going to be able to learn to battle that as an opener. Maybe he should bat at 5.
I'm with you, Raj. I'm 100% with you. I think his footwork is vulnerable early doors to a moving ball, and that's the real challenge with opening the batting against quality spin or pace, is that it really does challenge your decision making and challenge your footwork. I know my footwork has been challenged often, and I lose my off stump and my middle stump and my leg stump sometimes, all in the one delivery. But he is really being facing a stern examination, and it remains to be seen if he's going to bounce back. It will take, I think, an adjustment physically to his technique to be able to master opening the batting in all conditions, because he's a terrific player, wonderful hand-eye, but I think he's just got some adjustments to make.
The one thing I will say that I think we need to consider is that he's those tests that he's played, those 10 tests, they've been over an extended period of time. And I know he hasn't had great form in the white ball stuff during that time as well.
Broken thumb as well.
But that's what I mean. Like, he's had injuries. Yeah. Every time he sort of has a little slump, then he has an injury or something kind of happens. He has a little time out of the game. I mean, it's not an excuse. He can't just hold his spot forever because we think he's a great player. But I would love to, this 5 tests is now going to be the examination. He's going to get 5 tests. I would have thought his spot, you said. I don't see any of the other options, which is essentially Will Young. I don't think that they're going to pick Young ahead of him. And so he's going to get these 5 tests.
You still got the stock certificate
of Will Young? Yeah, look, I still think he's a good player. But anyway, I think Conway's a better player if we want to,
I'd agree. Right, let's move to Chennai.
Yeah, let's do that.
Everyone's favourite India player, Ravichandran Ashwin, has had a very good game. But yeah, where do the superlatives start for this Indian team? I know it's Bangladesh, but
it's Bangladesh. It's hot, coming in hot.
Yeah, but their dominance at home, I think India over the past 18 months, 2 years or so.
20 years at home.
It's
yeah,
like 10 years or something.
I think it's 2014.
2012. They've won every single series at home since 2012. Yeah. They're a pretty good side, India.
Yeah. I'm probably talking about recency bias of just how dominant they've been, though. I think, but yeah, certainly over a decent period of time.
I want to come back to how dominant India's been, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, start of the test, we were messaging on Slack about what a great start it was for Bangladesh. Hassan Mahmood and Naheed. Like, I'm quite excited by this Bangladesh seam attack. They've just brought these guys in, and they've actually, they had India in all sorts of trouble. They were 30 odd for 3. Rohit, Kohli gone, Shubman Gill, and then Pant and who was it? Jaiswal put together a partnership. Geez, I love watching Jaiswal bat. But then they go bang, bang, bang again, and they're 144 for 6, and you're thinking, okay, hold on here. Bangladesh just beaten Pakistan in a series. Maybe this Bangladesh side has got something about them. They're going to throw the cat among the pigeons straight away. But Ashwin and Jadeja, I mean, yeah, you guys jump in because you know how much I love Ravi Ashwin. We'll be here all day again.
Yeah, I think he's criminally underrated, Ravi Ashwin. Just there's no one in world cricket who's got numbers like him. Number of wickets he's got, 600s, 1450s, over 3,000 test runs to go with all of those wickets.
It's outrageous, his stats. I was looking at one the other day. He's, I think, behind only Botham now in terms of hundreds and fifers in the same match. Botham had a ridiculous number of, I think it was 8 or 9, something like that. Ashwin's up there. He's better than Cullis, better than all of those guys in terms of producing big scores with bat and ball in the same game. Got way more hundreds and fifers in test matches than Sam Curran currently has. I'm not going to predict what his future is going to look like. I'll leave that for others to do. But I mean, they're playing with a different set of cards to the rest of the world, really, in terms of having those guys at 7 and 8. Both of them could bat in the top 5 if need be. They've got a guy sitting on the bench in Akshar. If any of those guys go down, Akshar comes in and gives you exactly the same output, just as good with bat and ball. I mean, the riches that India have at the moment, I just really hope that we look back on both of those players' careers, Jadeja 36, Ashwin 37 now, and look back on them and realise later that we actually underrated them and we should have paid more attention to their careers when they were happening, because they just turn out match-winning performances for India time after time after time. And I don't think they get enough credit for it. And I think we'd all agree with that in terms of the careers that they put together.
I think people rate Ashwin obviously very, very highly. I think the one that might slip under the radar historically is Jadeja, because sometimes he is the second spinner. He's the guy who bats 6 or 7. He doesn't quite get the plaudits, and but when we did that, whenever we've done any statistical analysis on him, his numbers are just phenomenal in terms of his all-round performance. I said on our last podcast, I wonder how he's going to respond now. He's had a bit of pressure from Akshar, at least in the white ball formats. What Akshar was so important in that T20 World Cup, and Jadeja said, "Okay, I'm not going to play the white ball formats anymore. This is his format. He has to prove that he still deserves his spot with all these other guys banging on the door." And there we go. First Test match, and he deserved 100. He contributes a few wickets there as well. I mean, yeah, he's probably the one that I think we might not. Certainly me. I don't think up until the last couple of years I've really realised what a contributor he's been for that side, and how kind of important he is to making sure that balance is always there for that India side, whichever they want to go.
I'll ask you this question. How important is Ben Stokes to England's batting lineup? He bats, 5-6 for England. What's his average? 37, 38, something like that? I reckon Jadeja's
lower than that.
I think Jadeja's would be about the same. I'd say it's 35, 36 off the top of my head. And he averages low 20s.
23 with the ball, yeah.
26 with the bat.
only 26. Okay.
Sorry, who are we talking about? Jadeja?
Jadeja,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, I thought you were...
Jadeja with the bat.
Jadeja's 35 with the bat, I think.
Yeah.
36
There you go, 36 with the bat, 23, 24 with the ball, plus 12. An amazing contributor for India, for a guy who's overlooked as often as he is.
I also think he's kind of the benchmark of that bowling style as well now. I think if I look at the way that Akshar fires the ball in, and he's got a bit more subtlety, he has got the ability to throw it up, but they really just attack the stumps now, left-arm spinners, don't they? Whereas I think, you go back 10 years or so, that wasn't the way that a left-arm spinner would necessarily bowl. They were bowling for the outside edge, whereas now they are bowling, yes, for the outside edge, but they're also bowling to rip that front pad off and get that LB. And he's been the guy that I think, if you now look at, even, and I'm not making a comparison here before we get lots of very irate people, but he's probably the reason that England picked Tom Hartley to go to India. They were like, right, what have we got in our county game that replicates anything like the way that Akshar and Ravi Jadeja are going to bowl? But yeah, I think the point that Raj made is the really key one. Both him and Ashwin could probably bat a place, if not a place and a half higher, without really having a massive impact on that batting lineup. So yeah, scary, particularly if they're fit now, aren't they?
That's the other thing.
They could go for another 3-4 years.
That's the other thing. Jadeja, in particular, terrific athlete, just a terrific fielder.
Great fielder.
Absolute gun fielder. And, that's something
good
that
beard.
Terrific.
One of the best beards
but just
in cricket.
Underrated hair in cricket. Terrific cricketers and terrific sportsmen often have great hair, and you're seeing it writ large in Jadeja in particular.
So if you're the Indian, I'll go to you, Baldy, here. If you're the Indian coaching staff, just like you do on a Friday night, you're putting in place a plan of how the game's going to go over the next 5 days.
How many of those Indian players do you reckon text on a Friday night and say, sorry, I can't make it?
No, I was going to say, if you had a plan of how the test was going to go, that was it. Score 300 plus, seamers give India a lead.
Yeah.
You go on and then ask Bangladesh to score 400 plus in days 4 and 5 against those spinners.
It's absolutely the perfect script for India, isn't it? And Bangladesh were always up against it once India got out of trouble in that first innings. You just know you've got to strike. And if you get any advantage over India in India, you must drive that advantage home, because if India wrestle back to anything around parity in the first innings and you've got those guys to bowl at you in the second innings, you just know what's coming like a freight train. And it must be hard to get up for that mentally, right? You know what you're going to be up against, and all of a sudden now you're faced with scoring 700-800 in the second innings, and you've got to do it in 200
Feels like that,
or you've got about 200 plus overs for a draw, and you just know that you're going to get 1,200 balls that Jadeja and Ashwin are going to bowl to you, and then if they're not bowling, they bring Bumrah on. So how do you combat that? It's such a hard mental battle to climb.
And you're talking about how fit these guys are. They've got years left in them. Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma could have stayed on the bus. They didn't even need to turn up on the ground for this game. And then I'll read something else out to you. Shreyas Iyer, Arshdeep Singh, Mayank Agrawal, Sanju Samson, Ruturaj Gaikwad, Sai Sudarshan, Ishan Kishan, Dhruv Jurel, Kuldeep Yadav, Yash Dal, Washington Sundar, and Ajaz Patel all didn't make this side.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good test side, that side, eh? Like that's a test side that would win test matches away from home in more than one country.
Therein lies the big difference between what you face on a Saturday night before the game and India.
You can't just call one of those guys.
They have more than 8 players to choose from, so that's always
they're just so deep. How many of these players are going to have the whole Brad Hodge syndrome where they're just not going to get to play?
What a terrible commentator.
They're just not going to get to play international games.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm glad some of them actually, I don't want to cheapen the jersey, but I'm glad some of them actually are getting exposure through white ball formats. Like most of those guys you've mentioned, other than Jurel, I think, who played a couple of test matches, hasn't played that much white ball cricket. At least some of those guys are getting exposure in the white ball format. So if they do get a test call up, we haven't even mentioned Sarfaraz, the guy who didn't know who he was. Now I know who he was.
We had a comment last week that his younger brother's actually even better. So better player. So yeah, look out. I think the 376 probably was about par. I think maybe it was a little bit above par, but it was a good wicket for the majority of that test match. I think it didn't do anything particularly scary, but the way that the way you just touched on those Indian seamers. They ripped through that start, and Bangladesh is 40 for 5, and then the game really, the game is really over when in that situation. But that's what I think that has been the key aspect of making this India side a truly great side, is the fact that now they have a seam attack that can rival any other attack. Well, probably around the world in different conditions, especially with Bumrah. Obviously, we don't need, we praise him every single time we talk about him. But, to have Siraj and Akashdeep, how about that start from him, those first 2 deliveries to go through the gate and clean up and take 2 wickets. So I think for them, it seems like everyone just projects about when they go to Australia. What are we going to do when we go to Australia?
Yeah, they've got the seam attack.
Yeah.
They really have. Yeah. And they've got the variation in the seam attack as well, particularly with left arm of Arshdeep. They're tasty, aren't they? They're really, really tasty. Do you want to talk a little bit about Rishabh Pant?
Oh, can we please?
I saw a question today. I can't remember the context of it. Is Rishabh Pant better than Adam Gilchrist?
Probably not. Not the kind of thing you could say quite yet. But
I'm not saying where I come down on that side of the argument. And I am. Go back and look at our Rushmore, and I think I advocated quite heavily for Adam Gilchrist. So, at the moment, it isn't a question, but it's been raised. In and around that sort of cricketing media. But fairy tale for him. Comeback test match, isn't it? I think after a pretty horrific injury. And if you listen to Ricky Ponting, actually, it was his coach in the IPL, talk about how bad that was and how hard the rehab was for him. That's, fairy tale for him to come back and get a brilliant 100 in that second innings.
Just fantastic to see him back. It's cricket doesn't have many great fairy tales, but for a guy to come back from an injury like that was a life-threatening event. For him to be able to come back from that badly injured, to come back to be physically and mentally healthy, which is fantastic for him and his family. That's awesome first and foremost. But then to come back and play the way he did in his comeback match. I know we've seen him in white ball stuff for India prior to this in his comeback trail, but I mean, that's just a magical outcome for him. I'm so glad for him. He seems like everyone who talks about him talks super positively about him. And he has the same kind of impact on that Indian Test team that Adam Gilchrist had on the Australian Test team, because he's a wicketkeeper batter who can bat in the top 5 or 6. He bats at 5, but he could bat anywhere in the top 6. Punt. He attacks like Gilchrist does. He is a dynamic player. He's, you can talk about what he's like behind the wickets, but I just think he changes the balance of that Indian side in a similar way to the way that Ashwin and Jadeja changed the balance of that Indian side when they're there. And regardless of whether or not you have a guy like Dhruv Jurel, who I thought did really well when he played. Like he was great
as well.
He might not play another Test match unless Pant has another injury, So his Pant's impact on that Indian team is one that could take them to the World Test Championship.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I also think he's a future captain of that that Red Bull side, and that might be a way that someone else gets in to keep wicket if he bats at 5 and captains. But
just one note for me on Shubman Gill at number 3. Obviously didn't score any runs in the second innings. Went really well in the second innings, scoring 100, getting them through to that total where they declared. Everyone's saying, look, we found a number 3. We found a number 3 for India. I believe it.
Did they not think they'd found it before?
Well, he's been in and out of the side.
I guess he's been under pressure, hasn't he?
He's been opening a little bit, but I actually think he fits really well at 3, and I can see him having that position for the foreseeable future.
Before we kind of finish on the India stuff, can we talk a little bit more about that sort of them as a side in the context of history? Because and their dominance, I talked a little bit before, no one's beaten them at home in a series since England did in 2012, which is it's truly remarkable kind of stat. I really think that they now, I know that now they have ticked off that T20 World Cup. They actually have some silverware to show for this. These next couple of years, I think, are critical to them. One, as you said, win this World Test Championship, because they've been in all the finals. They've lost them, they've lost them so far. They have to win one, and this is a fantastic opportunity. And then they have to win that ODI World Cup in 2027. And then I think we are talking about them as one of the greatest sides of all time, because that's the only thing separating them now from those sides, the great Australia sides, the great West Indies side in the 80s. The difference was that they had that silverware. That Australia side, it felt like for a while you didn't even bother. What's the point of turning up to this World Cup, because we know Australia is going to win, at least in the ODI formats. Test series, we still go there and get thumped. But we always thought, we're going to Australia now. This is going to be an absolute shambles for us, because they're going to crush us. They've got the Border Gavaskar, then they go to England, I think, and then they've got the World Test Championship final, which I'm almost assured that they're going to be in it. They have to pick up the silverware now to really cement themselves.
I don't think they have to, but there's an opportunity for them to cement themselves as one of the great Test cricketing eras in modern times, right? Since the 48 Invincibles, we've had two, maybe three eras of dominant teams in world cricket. West Indies in the late 70s, 80s.
Yep.
Australia around that sort of Ponting, Steve Waugh era. Late 90s,
2 eras, didn't they?
Late 90s into going through to sort of 2004, 5-ish, somewhere around there. And now we've got this Indian team. Now, other teams have been very, very good in those eras, don't get me wrong, but those are the two that everybody thinks about, in my mind anyway. India have a chance to write themselves right alongside those sides if they can take their opportunities away against Australia, against England, and then in the World Test Championship. That would cement that triple crown of winning all those things away from home would cement their credentials as an all-time great cricket side.
Yeah, I think they've got to win in Australia.
Again, already done it twice.
Yeah, but I think they've got to go and win in Australia again
now.
And I also think they've got to win the World Test Championship. I don't think that the white ball stuff is as important for them to win the tournaments. I think they have to get to the semi-finals. But once you get there, I do think there's a level of there's a level of jeopardy involved. But I think the fact that they're featured in World Test Championship finals, it's really important, I think, that they go and win this one. And I think probably the criticism of the World Test Championship final at the moment is it's always in England. I think, again, that's going to need to get looked at. I genuinely don't know what the players would think, and I'm slightly biased because, I personally think Lords as a venue for a game of cricket, there's a magic about it regardless of who's playing. I wonder whether that holds as much of a sort of prestige for the players who do play there pretty regularly now. Every time you go to England, you get our test match at Lords, whether you're Sri Lanka or whether you're India or whether you're Australia. It's always the ground that gets a couple of games. So I think it'd be great, I think, for them to crown this period of dominance, but they need to win that World Test Championship final, I think. Assuming they're in it.
Oh, they'll be there. They're an awesome side. Do you want to talk about England? You had your bee in your bonnet last week about that T20 series and Liam Livingstone, and then he obviously heard you talking and showed what you needed to see from him. Anyone?
Did he? I thought we lost that game.
He was the player of the series,
and he is the world.
Oh, you're talking about the T20.
Yeah, he's the
T20,
number one.
sorry.
He's the number one T20 all rounder in the world now, according to the ICC rankings. So Liam Livingstone. I don't want to reverse moles you've been putting on Liam Livingstone, but it's worked a charm. I think you should reverse mole some of the Australians.
Who do you want to fire up about this week?
I don't really want to fire. I don't really want to fire up about it. I don't know, Baldy. You're winning at the moment. 2-1 up in this.
Only as good as your last game, Binksy.
Well, this is true, but do you care about this series?
No, not at all.
No,
not really. Even though it's against England, what are we tuning up for? Champions Trophy, which again is it's the poorer cousin of all of the ICC tournaments. I'm not even that excited about the Champions Trophy, if I'm being brutally honest. But it is a good opportunity for Australia to blood some cricketers. Great opportunity for England to blood some new cricketers. Bethel looks like a good sort. They've given opportunities to a few guys to come into that side and show their worth, show their mettle, which is proving great for them. But yeah, I mean, bilateral cricket and a tune-up for a tournament that I already don't really care about is not a great way to sell the series. I'm sorry, ICC, if I'm not marketing it to your liking, but let's talk through the results.
Well, that's why I was so surprised that Binksy was all fired up last week.
Yeah, no, I think I was fired up last week. A pretty stressful period of time for me on a personal level. But I maintain I don't think Livingstone should be there, and I don't care what the stats say. And the one thing I would say is he comes across as a thoroughly likable bloke, but he's been given a lot of chances. I think for me the talking point in this series is Alex Carey's put a little bit of a cat amongst the pigeons. Josh English was in and around that side. Is he in the squad?
He's got an injury. He's got a quad injury. Been out for these last two games, and Carey's got 70s in both games and done really, really well. So,
and then the greatest stat I heard today about this is that England's leading run scorer in the 11 that went out yesterday was Adil Rashid. So it probably just shows. I think England blooding some guys and getting some guys that have had a little bit of success in our red ball team. So Ben Duckett getting a run in the side at the top of the order.
I'm sure I read somewhere else today as well that Stokes said he would play. So
this is the thing, and I think that this is the thing about 50 over cricket. I think you can adapt to 50 over cricket more quickly than you can 20 over cricket. So I think that this is where you will see players come out of the woodwork to play in those big events, but they won't play too much of it in the intervening periods, particularly bilateral, and almost none in domestic cricket. The other thing, I think it's a bloody joke that this series is going to finish in October.
And then
is crazy.
And then the first test against Pakistan is on the 7th of October, I think. Yeah, for England. So
is there any concern for you around what looks like how easy it is for Australia to score runs?
Yes, but then I also kind of look at it that there's some bowlers that I think are clearly not playing for England across this, because we've got some guys that are 3-4 cricketers now. I think it's good that we've got Jofra Archer playing a little bit of cricket and great He got a little bit of tap, but at least he's getting through 10 overs. And I think that's really, really important and bodes well, I think, for the winter, in next winter, and obviously a home summer before the Ashes as well. Nice to see as well Brydon Cast, I think. And again, I think that this is a game where you're playing against, yes, an Australian team that have got a few people missing, but they are in incredible form apart from this last game. Bordy, are you like 10, 12 wins on the bounce or something like that?
We had 14. We set a record. 14. Yeah.
Okay.
So there was the second highest streak of consecutive ODI wins other than the other Australian team.
They went on the big run in the World Cup
in 2023.
So we're up against a pretty decent outfit. So worries no, because it's about blooding some guys. I think you take Adil Rashid out of that team, and you're definitely looking lights from a bowling perspective. But again, as Bordy alluded to, it's pretty meaningless bilateral rubbish, isn't it?
Way to sell the event, boys.
It does feel that way though when we have the tests there. That Sri Lanka New Zealand test was a really riveting test that whole time, and obviously India Bangladesh was for a period of time. They're very 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 hard fought. So yeah.
Is it on? It's not on TV here. Bordy, can you write a letter to someone?
I will write a strongly worded letter to the powers that be in all of our New Zealand media companies to request more coverage of meaningless bilateral cricket between two countries that aren't connected in any way, shape or form to
they're
New
pretty
Zealand.
Close, Australia, aren't they?
Well, they are close.
We share an internet
Strong
cable
ties.
with
We do. We have internet cables
nations.
that go in and out of Australia. That's true.
Yeah.
Lippy, do you want to cover your smaller bits of cricketing news whilst we're under the hour mark?
When we say smaller bits of cricketing news, Afghanistan have thumped South Africa in a couple of matches. That's fucking outrageous.
I've tried to offend everyone in this podcast.
This is brilliant. That's such a good outcome for them.
Got you swearing on the show.
I just think it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I know South Africa were missing a couple of players, but Afghanistan gave South Africa a dead set hiding in one of those games. Made 300 and bowled them out for 110. That's a proper.
That's a touch up.
Yeah, it's a proper shellacking.
They've showed for a while now. They're a good side in the white ball format. So I think, again, that's why I was really frustrated with the way that test panned out last week, because I wanted to see them. I wanted to see them play.
Albeit that they had a number of players missing from that test match playing franchise cricket, including, I think, Gurbaz was
there. He was going to play the test,
was he?
But Rashid Khan was not. And, a few other players. Like Gurbaz, the thing that struck me, he's 22. I feel like he's been around forever.
Well,
but he's 22 years old.
How old is Rashid Khan? I think it is entirely possible that Rashid Khan
dangerous discourse for us to go down here.
I know. But it does feel like they've been around for a long time, because they emerge so quickly in their pathway system, right? They emerge at 15 or 16, so it does feel like they've been around for a long, long time.
But what a player Gurbaz could be, and if he continues this trajectory over the next few years. The other thing to mention, I think, is that we'll probably cover in more depth in the coming weeks, is the White Ferns have obviously been playing against Australia. I mean, same old story. It really has been for New Zealand. Spin stocks look good. Batting has been a big problem, and it's been a big problem for a long, long time. And I don't know, there doesn't really especially seem to be any answers, which is the big concern. I mean, these games in the lead up to the T20 World Cup, which starts on the 3rd of October, which is why I said we'll probably look at things once that tournament starts. We'll start looking at the women's game a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. I mean, Georgia Plymouth scored a 50 in the last game, but that was her 49th international for New Zealand, and the first time she scored over 30. So, not to criticise her personally, but I think that's kind of the level that we're at, that someone who has not scored over 30 for 48 matches is still in our best batting, best top 6, top 7. So, yeah, it's big concerns for the White Ferns.
Stats today, Stu. You got Bordy's laptop.
I've always got stats on my sheet. I just don't always pull them out.
Yeah, I mean, the contrast that with the Australian team, and Australians were taking each other out, trying to get other people out of the team so they could get into the starting 11. Didn't quite work out for Gardner and Wareham. Although it worked out okay for Wareham because she got to play and Gardner had to sit out. But yeah, that
She did
Australia
right in that last game,
yeah,
Gardner.
exactly. So Australia looking strong again coming into the World Cup. But it's going to be interesting because England have been playing some really good cricket in the women's game for a wee while now. I'm not doing that to put Moz on you. They genuinely have been playing good cricket. They drew the Ashes series, that's a fact. And they've been playing some really good cricket.
India's been building.
India's been building.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a real competitive World Cup. It's actually starting to get me excited about some actual tournament cricket coming up.
I think it is going to be an exciting World Cup. I do think there's still a gulf between Australia and the rest. But,
Yep, sure.
Yeah. So you're dead set
Okay.
favourites. Is that a good place to leave it for this evening?
That's about it.
Well, thanks for tuning in to the Top Order podcast. We will be back in your feeds to wrap up the Test match, which starts, as Lippy mentioned, tomorrow. So it's Wednesday, New Zealand time here. Test match starts on Thursday. We'll also wrap up that Australia-England series, unless it stretches on to Bonfire Night. I think it's over by middle of October or something like that.
Oh, it's probably still going this time next year, but
Yeah.
we'll see what we do.
But that is all we've got time for on this episode of the Top Order podcast. So it's good night and God bless from us here in Auckland. We'll see you soon. Good night.